Hi, everyone. Um, so it's obviously a pleasure to introduce Alok. Many of you know Alok Nandi. Some of you have had the pleasure to be a part of this masterclass at the campus just after ADW. So, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with his work. Uh, to make the introduction short, so Alok is also the past president of IxDA, currently managing director of Spread Design, and more than that, I think for me, Alok is a very important design thinker of our times, and somebody who is actually being on the forefront of looking at interaction design and design thinking as design thinking together. And it could possibly also be because Alok comes from a multidisciplinary background himself. Um, Electromechanical engineer, management, film studies, then brand managing at Procter & Gamble, teaching in MBA programs, in design schools. So Alok wears many hats, and over the years, Alok is also a friend in the sense that he's a friend of, I think, the Indian design education industry as a whole, the community. He's also, if you follow his activities online, you will see that Alok has been in the forefront of conducting talks, workshops, pushing for new directions, particularly in interaction design. If all of you would be knowing the topic of today's session, design thinking, designing next, assemblage thinking, and it's for the way I understand it, it's like pushing our imagination towards a newer version of a digital era, which is going to come, which is already here, I think, Alok. And without wasting too much time, I hand over the session to Alok to introduce how you would want to go about it. And yeah, I mean, you are a very good speaker, so I don't have much to say after this.
I think Colonel Bose wanted to say something.
Yeah, can I come in for a moment? It's always wonderful to see students so engaged. They've all registered and therefore they want to be part of it and they want to hear Alok. VC stands in the intersection of interaction design, UI, UX. And that's where the VC students, especially the senior batches and the past batches, have shown exemplary flair and gone into some of the most cutting edge studios, and a lot of their work which I see on a day-to-day basis, some of it forming up into their dissertation capstone projects are really, really amazing. Yeah. So that gives me time to welcome Alok. Alok is a friend of UID, in other words. That is, he's a friend for all of us. I've sent the newly developing interaction design BDES course also to him to get it vetted, knowing fully well he's an authority there. He was a past president of the Interaction Design Association. And we all know how much interaction design has entered each and every phase of the design, thought process, cycle, thinking, creativity, whatever. So welcome Alok, and welcome to all my bright students who have taken time out to be here. It will be an interactive session and he will give you some tasks, and please be up with his demands, because that's how education and knowledge flows. Over to Alok.
Thank you. Thank you all for being there, and thanks for having the setting in place. If audio goes down, Abro or Rahul, you just make a sign, but is it okay now? A quick
yeah, perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
Okay, great. Good afternoon there. It's end of morning here, so we'll be spending a short hour together, and some of you have already been active and attending some of the conversations we had. What I decided is to come, as Colonel Bose was telling, to come with thinking which allows us to push our thinking and making. And we have you guys, I see you as building a center of excellence about what design could be. And that is the intention now. So let me frame that. In the coming days and for the coming weeks, you have been flooded with Zoom meetings, spending time on screen, and getting into ways of interacting with people in other ways than usual. So the center of gravity of your modalities of interactions have changed. For the last few weeks, we are living in a kind of living lab. And we need to reflect on that. Tomorrow you'll have another session with Suryavanka, another session is coming about photography and so forth, so on. Some of you have been involved in the hackathon with WDO and Vikram. So you have been influenced and active with many streams of activities. And my question to all of us for this coming half an hour, and then we'll move into interactive mode, is what does it mean if we need to rethink the position of design thinking? And Rahul was mentioning that I'm questioning the notion of design thinking a lot nowadays. What does it mean if we have to put that in connections to some other ways of thinking? Because we talk a lot about design thinking, we practice some other ways of thinking. And so before getting into the stuff I'm going to share with you, I would like two things. One, I'm not using any PowerPoint because we are getting sick of PowerPoint. Or we are having a way of consuming PowerPoint which is always the same. So the first thing I'm asking all of you is what we call active listening. You are listening to some stuff I'm talking about. But in order to make that active listening more active, what we have discussed with Rahul and Abrojit is that each of you will do some visual sketching of the ideas I'm going to share with you. Now, the visual sketching can be with pen and paper, can be with Photoshop, can be with Illustrator, can be with GIMP, can be with anything. And you'll have about 5 days to gather, clarify your ideas, do some iterations, and then put that on a drive. And the address of the drive was shared in the chat box. So keep in mind that you need that address to put back your contributions. So what are we getting into is I'm going to share with you a number of things which are there to trigger ideation and push you into reframing what I've been sharing with you in a visual form. So we are moving from thinking to visualizing. And that will be part of the dialogic process in which we are getting into. And this dialogic process is there to question our modalities of interacting. So today, modalities of interacting is each of us is in one physical place, watching a screen and looking at the screen and then trying to make so-called eye contact. Because we know that one of the fundamental media of human-to-human interaction is eye contact. And then there is body language, there is gesture. Some of you may notice that I'm using a lot the hands to talk, which is something I'm used to. But when you watch that, it might sound bizarre because we see a bunch of hands which are moving like that. But okay, it's part of interaction modalities. So this is setting the stage. As I mentioned, active listening, and second, visual contribution by you, and you have 5 days. So what are we going to talk about? The title of this is very abstract. Designing for the next, Assemblage Thinking. And assemblage sounds very Frenchy, is about putting together some stuff. But it's allowing us to go back and look at philosophy, look at actor network theory, look at things that we need to embrace as designers and take. We need, as I mentioned to some of you when we were in Ahmedabad, is we need to have mastery of abstraction. And this is a great moment. We can spend sometimes abstracting and then trying to visualize those abstractions and put them together. So I'll take assemblage as a triggering word for thinking about systems. An assemblage of stuff needs to be seen in a dynamic mode. And that is where things are getting complex. Because if we look a lot at our ways of designing stuff, it's very easy to design on a surface, take ideas and put them and look at the articulation. It's very easy or sort of to look at things like we are used to. This is a thing, a smartphone. Inside the smartphone, there are lots of dynamic stuff happening and changing. And if I don't connect that to this, the smartphone will die in few minutes because it doesn't have any more energy. So there is input of content, there is input of energy, there is output, there is consumption. And the question I'm raising to us as designers is how can we reframe consumption modalities vis-a-vis production modalities? How can we reassemble production stuff in order to make consumption more sustainable in systems where there has been one core assumption, which is the assumption of growth. Growth, growth, growth in the capitalistic model is showing its limits. And we as designers, we need to re-question that assumption of growth. And that's why I thought that assemblage thinking is something which is fundamental nowadays. We have different ways of thinking, I said at the beginning of my talk. Creative thinking, critical thinking, design thinking, futures thinking, systems thinking, complex thinking. All these ways of thinking need to coexist in some ways. And our job as designers is to find the right balance. Sequential thinking is something, or some of us call that linear thinking, is something which has taken too much bandwidth in our brains. Look at education. The industrial mindset of education is pushing ourselves to rethink how to create knowledge, how to share knowledge. And for me, design is fundamentally about the generation of knowledge and that re-articulation. So I'll use three words which will allow us to clarify the landscape. One which is form. There is a sound coming back. Maybe Ravi, if you can go into mute mode. Ravi, are you there? Ravi Thakur. I think you should go into mute mode. But it's an interesting interaction from Ravi. I don't know if Ravi is still listening to us, or because the first word I said is form. Next to form, I would like to add the word norm. Because when we are shaping stuff, we are giving form, things are getting into norm, and norm puts us into normality. So next to norm, I'll add a third word, which is storm. Form, norm, and storm. These are three triggering words that I'll ask you to think about connected to assemblage. And what is the storm which is happening nowadays? In Japan, we would call that tsunami. The tsunami of COVID is re-questioning form and norm. So we have form, norm, and storm. We have place, we have people, and we have think. How can we re-articulate all this as designers for 2030, 2040, 2050 is my question to all of us. And I was telling when beginning this, UID is and will be, should be, can be a center of excellence because we need to develop new thinking. By developing new thinking, we'll be able to generate new making. So what I'm telling is thinking requires us to rethink about tooling, new tools. Tooling will allow us to rethink about transformation. Transforming will think and push us to rethink about transportation. Because design, if we look at in a very generic way, is about transformation and transportation. Any activities you put together and you rethink, it's about form and port, transformation, transportation. So you see that my assemblage framework, which is a kind of model I'm proposing to rethink our systems, is telling one thing: one size doesn't fit all. And that is what we are seeing nowadays. The problem with industrial mindset is that for 100 years, for 50 years, it has pushed us into one size fits all. And internet, dynamic networks are re-questioning that, or try to re-question, then again, the pressure of the one size fits all came here. And that is where designers, we need to rethink tooling for transformation and transportation in new modalities. So what is our assemblage thinking pushing us to? Telling that we need to forget the top-down approach, and we need to combine bottom-up approach with some top-down regulation. And that leads us to systems thinking. In systems thinking, we need to see how to rebalance the making of stuffs in different ways. Some of you have been in that design challenge or hackathon about COVID with WDO. You are working on what I would call the short term, the next of the now, the tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Our challenge will be to articulate the tomorrow with the day after tomorrow with the day after tomorrow. So we need to work on horizons. And what I'm suggesting with the assemblage thinking is, first, we need to get out of what we call that consensual hallucination, because we are living in a world where there are some rules and habits which create hallucination, and that hallucination is consensual. We need to be critical about that. And there comes the notion of critical thinking. And I've already been talking about this critical thinking attitude and mindset that we need to push again and again. So to get out of this consensual hallucination, something came and brought a storm. It's that virus. What did it do if we try to reflect? It allowed us to re-question some habits from the intangible to the tangible. And through assemblage thinking, what I'm trying to push all of us is that we need to move from thinking about spaces only to times. Multiple times is what will drive thinking about interaction design. Interaction design is not only about human-machine interaction. I'm touching my keyboard and things are happening on the screen. I'm touching my smartphone and I'm interacting one-to-one, human to machine, but it's getting into more complex interrelations between machine and machine. Some servers are talking to some other server and providing content. Human to machine to human, which is what we are doing now. We are having human to machine to server to machine to human. And what have we created here? We have created one moment. Every one of us is together for 1 hour, getting into interactions. So what is driving these set of interaction modalities now is not the space, is not the place, because each of us are in our distributed places. It's the time. It's you are in Ahmedabad or in some parts of India, and it's one time there. I'm in Brussels, and for me now it's 11:27. So we have 3 hours and a half of time difference, but we are together in the same temporality. And so to make our abstract conversation more tangible, what I'm claiming is that all our thinking needs to move from spatialities to temporalities. And in temporalities, we'll have different ways of interacting, or at least different rules to trigger the ways we interact. How would that translate in some concrete ways? One way would be all of us live in cities. If we break the temporality of 9 to 5, we would have less traffic jam. Because traffic jam is what? An overflow of set of interactions. At 9 o'clock in the morning, all the cars rushing into city centers, and at 5 or 6 p.m., all the cars going out of city centers or nodes of activities. So all the systems for 100 years have been thought into one set of temporality and many set of spatialities. And that really resulted in traffic jams. And so assemblage thinking is telling, okay, maybe we should not have all activities from 9 to 5, but we should redistribute that temporally. Like we are busy redistributing that spatially. So we are getting back to the basics of human behaviors. And as designers, our ethos is looking at human behaviors and trying to rebalance some of them. And we need to talk and work with policymakers, with technologists, with sociologists, in order to understand what are the most interesting behavior for the well-being of the human being, and try to make sure that as a collective, we are building spaces and places where we better the human experience. So I was talking about form, norm, and storm. And my question to all of us is the form of temporal distribution is a week begins on Monday, finishes on Friday or Saturday. Sunday is supposed to be the day off. Maybe we should re-question that. Some of us, and it already happened, some of us don't take their Sunday on Sunday. They break on some other days. Some of us don't work only from 9 to 5, but work in chunks of 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening, and do some other stuff in the afternoon. So we are re-questioning the form of our practice, and we are coming with other norms. And that is because of the storm which was brought by COVID. But COVID is only one storm. There are some other storms which happen and which are going to happen. And as designers, we need to be critical and curious and try to understand what are the patterns and how can we cap on that? How can we break consensual hallucination and how can we re-envision distributed systems. Building on that, I would like to clarify on one misunderstanding: the word virtual versus the word real versus the word actual. What is reality is a combination of actuality and virtuality. What is actuality? Actuality is what is happening now, here, in your place. Each of you, what is your actuality? Your actuality is you are in front of a screen, and some of you are busy sketching, some of you are busy noting. That is the now and the here. What is virtual? Virtual is the combination of our conversation. And what is reality? Your reality is the sum of your actuality and the virtuality of conversations we are busy shaping. So if we are clear on those assumptions, those elements of the stage in which we are active, then all this allows us to rethink about interaction design in a much larger way. No more human-machine interaction or human-computer interaction, but rethinking in what in the 1950s was labeled under cybernetics. So we need to go back into the history and the philosophy of how human beings were interacting 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, and try to say, okay, how can we learn from things we have unlearned, and how learn things we have learned in these last 5 years, 10 years, which are based on models which were envisioned 100 years ago or 50 years ago. And the job of design and designers, that means you guys, is to say, okay, number one, re-question assumptions, critical thinking. Number two, come with scenarios which envision some interesting stuff, creative thinking. Number three, recombination of all this in interesting ways, systems thinking. Number four, envision that into some concrete stuff, prototypal thinking. Put that into futures, projection, and try to see how might we, does it make sense? How might we, the question you have been busy with, and number two, does it make sense? So it's sense-making versus change-making. Now, all this, you have heard that for about 100 times. What I'm suggesting is remapping all this and putting them together so you build your own roadmap as designers. Because nobody will design your roadmap. Nobody will design your radar. And we as designers, we need to be meta designers. We need to be reflective practitioners and be critical about our thinking and our making in order to generate our tooling. We need to have new conceptual tools. The D-School, the design thinking tool, is too simplistic. 5 steps, 3 steps, 7 steps, 9 steps. It's too sequential and linear thinking. UID school need to come with a set of tools which are built by you guys. NID came with some. Any other school on the planet is busy with some set of practice. Each of you need to come with. Now, when I say that, what I'm trying to also convey is that these needs to re-question capitalistic models, sequential thinking model, linear model, one-to-many, industrial mindset needs to be completely re-questioned. And that is a golden opportunity we have nowadays. And what I did now is just seeding some of these elements to work on 3 important dimensions. One is intention. We need to reframe, rethink, and re-push the notion of intention. Because the ethos and the essence of design is about visualizing, framing, and phrasing intentions. We need to connect intention to action, because design is about action. Design is not about staying in our ivory tower and thinking about the world. Philosophy is for there. Poetry is there. Art is there. But we need to be involved in actions involving the collective. And the third dimension, which is fundamental and so complex, is what I've been alluding to during this half an hour, is what I call contextual thinking. Contextual thinking is creating the stage where assemblage thinking will allow to push the action and reorder all the thinking bricks I have been mentioning. So we know things which we are certain about, or we think we know. We know things we agree about. And there comes the question for us designers, is how are we moving to things we don't agree about? And how do we move to things we are not certain about? Because as designers, we are working on zones of disagreement and zones of uncertainties. And it's a continuum. It's not white and black. It's not 0 and 1. It's not binary thinking. There is a series of levels that we need to work on, master, and re-question. Food systems is one of the most fascinating areas where we need to rethink how food is being produced, how food is being consumed, how food is being transported, how food is being transformed. And that is where we begin to become very tangible. So all the elements I have been talking about in very abstract ways, if we take food systems as an area, it becomes completely tangible. Because each of you, each of us need to eat, to live, or to survive. And we see that infrastructures for food systems are not optimal, are not ideal. And the storm which is happening is attacking all our infrastructure thinking. And that is where you as designers, you have a fantastic moment to think about infrastructures, systems. And if you can apply that to food systems and visualize and take the next 2-3 days to re-visualize and rethink some of the elements of the conversation we are having now, and propose to us, Colonel Bose, to Rahul, to Abrojit, and to me, some visualizations of the ideas I've been sharing now, it will allow us to move into iteration 2 or 3 or 4. Because what we'll get into is the following. I have shared some elements of a model, a framework, which I call assemblage thinking. I have proposed that we use food systems to rethink about our systems in tangible ways. So that is where you have to take action and come as designers with visual scenarios. You'll share that with us, and Rahul and Abrojit and Colonel Bose and myself will go through that in a week, because you have 5 days to rethink and reshape the ideas. And then we'll use that material and see how we can come back to you, collect and put all this together and move into connections between the different visualizations you have proposed, so that we are getting into tangible ways of doing assemblage thinking, moving from assemblage thinking to assemblage visualizing, and from there we'll move to assemblage scenarios. So Rahul, I propose to stop here and begin to interact with the students. and see how we are going to explore new modalities of interaction by being hands-on, building on this set of assemblage visualizations that the student will propose. Question, interaction time.
This is the perfect time for students to come up with questions and thoughts. The model Alok is talking about is not a model that we engage it on a day-to-day basis. You know? Though while teaching you communication history and whatever kind of outreaches, we have tried to push you into a direction to tell you that the world is moving away from non-linear thought process and to have a more critical design systems merged way of thinking. However, I know that for a lot of you, and for this I also have to co-share the blame of the Indian school education system, that we are hyper-trained in a very linear thought process.
Yeah.
And
Rahul,
and that's the way the
may
entire
come in.
society.
Rahul, since time is short, just rotate from one side, let students raise their hand electronically and let it go through a question and answer session.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for them to, I'm just trying to instigate them to raise their hand.
Just instigate them. Yeah.
So, Srinidhi, Siddharth, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts, questions.
Yeah, one by one, just rotate so that everyone gets a chance.
I can also see Parth.
So, Abrojit, you be the moderator, point out and give some time and close it, go to the next like that. Otherwise, we'll run short of time.
Yeah, Siddharth, you are up.
Sir, I have a question. So far, hello. So far, a lot of the workflows that we as designers deal with on a day-to-day basis is linear, right? The number of stakeholders involved makes it or forces it to be a linear process. What would you advise somebody who is wanting to branch out and diversify their own design process?
Give me some more elements of your question so that we can situate that.
Right. So suppose there is a lot of pressure from the higher ups to meet a certain deadlines, and there are a lot of testing to be done. There's deadlines to meet. There's prototyping to be done, and there's deployment, of course. So because of the sheer number of stakeholders involved, it makes it a linear process by very nature of the workforce, right? The number of people involved forces it to follow a linear path. So if as a designer, I'd like to switch the whole workflow so that it's a little more flexible, how would you advise someone to do that?
So it's a super important question you are putting on the table, because what you are touching upon is we need to re-envision some systems where too much effort has been given to execution modalities and not enough to exploration.
Exactly, yes.
So in order to have more effort given to exploration, we need policymakers or the client or the commissioning agent to understand that if we don't allocate enough time in exploration, execution will be bad because of not enough explored assumptions at the initial phase. So I'll give you one concrete example. Filmmaking. We see so many bad movies because the scenario, the film script, is not well written, well done.
Yeah.
And we have seen in the film industry, in terms of film budget, that the scenario budget is only 1 to 2%, and all the money goes into shooting, star, and everything.
Yeah.
If we give 1 person extra to film writing, scenario writing, from 2 to 3 or 4%, the quality of film raises high. So I use that example of film writing and film shooting and film consumption as an interesting case study for us as designers.
Yeah.
We as designers, we are the script writers. We are the scenario makers.
Absolutely.
But we as designers, we have to follow the development and the implementation of the film. So we need to be both, but we need to make sure that we have enough time to write the right script and to explore. So I have used the word exploration, then I have used the word execution, and I would like us to keep another word, which is extraction. We are globally in an economy where value is extracted. And the problem is with extraction, there are people who are abused.
Absolutely.
We're talking of user-centered design in UX, UI, user interface, user experience. But the challenge is that we are seeing many systems where it's more abuser-centered design.
True.
Interface where people are abused. And that is where we need critical thinking. And the abuse is done to capitalistic model, maybe if I'm too simplistic, where the value is only money-centered and financial rather than human-centric or emotional or affective. And that is where we need to re-question some stuff. So your question is quite big and large, but I'm trying to identify 2-3 elements so that we make it more tangible. Does that make sense at that stage?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to see you, huh?
Yeah, same to you, sir.
So your challenge, Siddharth, will be how to visualize that and how to position. And I'll urge some of you to use your typographic skills and play with typography, with size, dimensions, dynamics, to see how we can play with the notion of execution versus exploration versus extraction versus all these notions I have been coming with. That will be quite fun.
Yeah.
I think Simran had a question for you.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for sharing lots of insight. I have just one question about the food system, which you said. Like recently, I was working for blind children, and I was trying to implement something in their canteen areas because maximum of the donations where the organized NGOs get was through food. So I wanted to ask, like, can you just give like point to one example where you think that in that food system or the way the food is consumed today or the way the food is looked at has some flaw or has some like or there is some problem which is identified by you, like, so that I can like get a one example of how I have to think upon it.
Okay, so we'll take food systems and we'll look at food systems from different scales. The meta scale, and it is a violent scale. One, we are about 8 to 9 billion people on the planet. And 10 years ago, I was giving a talk and I was beginning my talk about food systems with one example. 1 billion people are overfed, obese, and 1 billion people are hungry, underfed. And we are telling that we are a civilization. So that is the meta. And I said to you, it's violent, it's brutal. And that is going to be more violent in the coming weeks and days because of people not getting access to food. If we look at the big picture, we get out depressed. But as designers, we are optimists. So we need to scale down. And I'll use one fascinating and interesting example, which is happening in different parts of the planet. And then I'll come back to your case about blind children having to be fed. And I'll connect both of them. So I'll go back to 1200 years ago, 1300 years ago, but it can be 3000 years ago. In Indian culture, we have a theory which was drafted and which is called the rasa system. It's coming from performing arts, and it has been translated into food systems. And I'm sure Rahul is noting is something we don't talk enough in design. We talk about the 4 tastes of food: sweet, salted, and you know the 4.
Umami. Umami.
You are talking about umami. Umami is the 5th taste.
Yes.
But in India, we talk about 7 tastes.
Okay.
Because when you eat some stuff which makes your throat dry, it's a chemical effect. You see? Bitter is another way of looking at food systems. So what I'm trying to go towards is the thali. The thali is something which you have balance amongst different tastes and components and attributes, which makes we are what we eat. That's why I was telling, let's go back 3000 years ago. In Upanishad, we are talking about that. Today, if we look at McDonald's, Burger King, and whatever, they completely missed that we are what we eat. And so it results in obesity problem, diabetes, and so. So I've been scaling down from meta to our body, to we are what we eat, to the thali. Now, if I go into another country, and I look at the bento box, you have a balance of different ingredients and components, which makes what you are ingesting, what you are consuming, good for your health and body. Now, let's take the example of the Japanese bento or the Indian thali. And let's combine that, and let's say that our target group is children who are blind and who have to eat and who don't see what they eat, but who remembers what is where in their bento thali box or in their zones. And they have one fantastic modality of interaction, which is smell. You know that when we eat, 80% of our pleasure of eating is through our capacity of nasal odor interaction. We don't talk enough about interaction designed for smelling. That is so fundamental, both in acceptance and rejection of what we are eating. And paradoxically, if we go back to that notion of breath and smell and COVID, coronavirus, it's attacking through our system here. So as designers, you see that we have begun to interact food systems, meta question, smelling interaction with a contemporary issue, which is a planetary one, which is coronavirus. Because we have seen through some cases, it's not everywhere, that people who get infected through coronavirus loses the notion of taste. So everything is so much interconnected, and we are in a moment where there is the storm, and we are trying to understand what are the interrelations between all these components, and what are the questions we as designers need to think about. Now, let's go back to the blind children. If you as designers can help design something which allows them to have the pleasure of food, which is not always the same food every day, but where in your design of thali, you have put some zones where they can have their frame of reference and things are changing in a dynamic way every day. You have built new routines. You have created new habits, taking into account their pleasure and making sure that they are not getting into a fatigue mode. And that is where some added value is coming. You have been doing systems thinking, you have been looking at different scales, you have been doing actions, you have been providing food in order for them to have the pleasure of eating and so forth. Does it allow you to rethink some of the elements you have been busy with?
Yes. Yeah.
So now your challenge is to come with a nice thali bento box for all of us.
Yes.
Because one thing which is interesting is that if we design for some groups which are extreme, they are missing one modality of interaction, which is the eye.
Hi.
That design can be also helpful and interesting for other target groups.
Others, right.
That is where our role as designers is fascinating.
Yes.
Great. So, Alok, I think Srinidhi has a question for you.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Sir,
Hi.
I have to firstly start off by saying that I'm very fascinated by interaction design because that is sort of the core of all design systems, I feel. Because, yeah, and when you were saying something about we have to rethink our existing systems and we have to evolve, we have to rethink our intentions, and we have to evolve from there, especially when there are catalysts such as the coronavirus that's happening right now in the world. And my question was, so anytime you try to bring out any kind of a change, it's bound to cause some kind of a disruption, right? So how do you go about this whole transition and creating a whole new system design which can be smooth? And yeah, basically.
So it's a tough question because there is a desire of seeing transformation smooth, but often it can't be smooth. So we have to live with that paradox. And to try to get into the topic you're raising, I'll come with one provocation for all of us. You are attending many Zooms, you have attended many classes, and you have read many books. And often you might have seen that design is politic. Design is political. Any action of design results in something political. My provocation to all of us is, then why don't politicians call designers in this moment? So I'm coming with a paradox, and I'll come back to your point, which is all of us, we are working for the better condition of the human being. That is a political action. Interaction design is activist. And the problem we have is that we are talking in our circles. All of us are convinced of that. And if we want to have impact, and that is your question, we need to get engaged with policymakers, with business makers, with non-for-profit NGOs, and us as the agent for catalyst. The big problem I see on the planet is that 99% of all these other stakeholders don't even realize that we exist. And that is where I suggest that we as designers, we need to be more outspoken, and we need to talk to policymakers. Why is the government in your state calling designers for helping to think about the next and the future? To my knowledge, very few. Or here in France and Belgium, I'm busy writing letters to the government because government is not calling us. And we pretend in all our studies, in our curricula and everything, that we are the one who are designing the next and the future. And that is where we need to be more activist. And interaction design and design for me is the same. Any kind of design activity is about interaction. Otherwise, why are we? Okay. So interaction design is the glue between the joint. It's the joint between the stuff. It's like your curry. If you don't have spices and gravy, it's not a curry. Okay. And so we need to do some curry thinking, if I might use that.
Cool. I think I hope
Thank you, sir.
answers the question. Yeah. Anybody else? Anybody else who wants to talk? Ask?
I have a question. So, Tishri, you were just saying that design is also political, and you were talking about linear thinking. So, do you think that if we were to involve people who aren't just designers, that the thought process of linear thinking would kind of change?
I hope so, but it's a difficult one. So let me clarify one thing that I didn't expand in this conversation. In some other talks, I was talking about expert design and diffuse design. Is that notion clear to you? Okay, you are expert designers, but 90% of the people in their everyday life are diffuse designers. They're doing design without even using the word design. When your mother or father is cooking, they are designing some stuff because they are transforming and they are making stuff which you can share and eat. That is diffuse design. And all the human beings are doing diffuse design. So what do I mean by that? Policymakers, entrepreneurs, startup, they're all busy with what I call the transversal dimension of design. But you are studying for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to become expert designers. So as expert designers, you are building a toolbox which allow to tackle problems in expert ways that the others can't. So I'll give you another example. Imagine that you are a doctor. You have studied for 8, 9, 10 years, and your job as doctor is to bring back the health in normal conditions. That's the role of a medical doctor. But it's not because you don't go to the doctor that you cannot rebalance your health by being preventive and so forth. So what I'm telling is the doctor is the expert, but you as a human being, you do some diffuse medical act without being the expert. How do you do your first medical act by being preventive and not curative? Is by eating stuff which are not harming your body. This is diffused health management compared to the expert health management. So our job as designers, being expert designers, is to make sure that we master our toolbox and that we are able to talk to policymakers and others and show them that we are adding value and looking at worlds in different ways than the linear thinking wala. Because that was your initial question. A lot of them have linear thinking wala. What is the job of we as designers? Is to raise questions. You'll see in lots of literature, we are problem solvers and bringing solutions. Yes, but it doesn't depend only upon us, because many solutions are brought by policymakers, regulators, entrepreneurs, startups. Our job as designers is to try to push them to raise the right question, because we have done enough exploration and we have developed the ability to raise questions in meaningful ways in a quick way. It's a doctor. If you go to the doctor and he has to read 10,000 pages before telling that you have that problem in your body, you won't go to that doctor. The doctor has embodied all the knowledge. You go there in 5 minutes. My father was a doctor. He used to take the hand and he used to do some diagnosis in 5 minutes. And then you had some other technocentric doctors who would take 10 hours to do that because they need a scan, they need a MRI and all this stuff. And my father would say, no, it's that. And he was right 99% of the time because he embodied knowledge for 40 years. So our job as designers is to embody that and explore and push. Does that bring some thinking to you?
Yeah, that was very helpful.
Now you are the expert, huh? So you have to embody all this knowledge. And when someone is asking a question, you have built some patterns to explore questions and generate new questions. And that is what we talk about. What if, how might we, and all this, you know. But we need to be critical also. What if, what if, what if, what if, you see. I'm looking forward to all your visualizations, by the way.
Sir, I have one more mild question, like from what you had said. You're talking about how your father was used to give the, the actual problem. He used to solve that, but then all these medical people, they give thousands of MRI scans and whatnot. And that is something that has come to my notice, is that everything has become very business centric. So currently our systems are completely based on profit motives. And that is a huge problem in terms of designing interactions that are actually helping people. Like, where do we find the balance between the two motives? Or
yeah, so you're bringing another interesting topic, which I'll add another layer to that. Not only it's business centric, but it's also technocentric. And some techno players are pushing their technologies because they can make more money. And we see that in the medical systems, healthcare systems. The healthcare systems will push nowadays, 2020, some tools and instruments because it's making their instruments raising finance, money. And some doctors, they are no more trained as they were 50 years or 30 years ago into human-to-human interactions. And we are getting back to the whole interaction design. Doctors and medical sector is a fascinating sector for all of us into design. And I know Siddharth's father is a doctor, if I can tell that. They are busy doing interaction, human to human, for thousands of years. Now, if we go back to the history of medical activities, medicine 150 years ago was seen as magic. Medicine 100 years ago, 1919, there was a huge storm where in the universities, medical activities had to be more scientific and evidence-based. The education of medical systems went through storms in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 1960s, and that is what we are going through in the design sector. Design is not magic. One part of design needs to be evidence-based, but I have another set of thoughts which I call narrative-based. Design is about sharing stories. And our job as designers is to have the balance between storytellers and maker of stuff. And that is what is fun for us as designers, is to balance making and telling about making so that people can engage and embrace that. And that brings back to my title about assemblage thinking, because assemblage thinking has got many layers. The storytelling layer, intention is a story, then you are getting into action, but the consumption of what you have done becomes a story for the user. And when we talk about UX and UI, UI is looking at the interface modalities, UX is looking at the experiential modalities, but when the user has experienced your stuff, your system, the user, if she or he is happy, is sharing that with someone else, and then the someone else is using your system. So you have stories at that level, at the consumption level, and you have stories at the making level. And that is where we designers, we need to envision stories. Stories of development, stories of consumption, stories of process. So I see story as a tool for us designers, both at the intention level, at the process level, and at the experience level. And then you can break down that at different phases.
Thank you.
Thanks. So how are we doing?
Alok, would you mind repeating what exactly they are supposed to do? Then probably
Yeah, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we are getting into what I would call the brief. You are designers. We have set the stage by sharing many concepts and ideas. Some of them were abstract. Some of them were anecdotal. We have different ways of looking at systems. And so the brief for all of you is the following. It's taking some time, 1, 2, 3 days, and visualizing on a surface, can be a screen or a piece of paper, some of the ideas which triggered your thinking, and interconnect these ideas on that piece of paper or on screen, play with typography, drawing, sketching, whatever you want to visualize your understanding of some of these complex interrelations, and then upload that on the drive which was set by Abrojeet on Google. Is that clear enough?
People, I'm actually posting the drive link here right now. So in most of the cases, from what I understand, it would probably be posting a PDF or a series of JPEGs. Do make a folder with your name and department, and then upload your PDF or your JPEGs or your work basically within that folder, please. The link is here. You can see it in the chat box. You can copy paste the link and keep it with you.
Yeah, it's good to make sure that you find a way so that we quickly see who has done what. So if it's a bunch of JPEGs, put them in a folder.
Yeah.
If it's a PDF, make sure that all fits together. I would suggest you put your first name, your family name, and then a section so that we can find you back. What would be good is also you put your email address somewhere in the document or.
I think, yeah, it's a very good idea to actually include your email address as well. Aman, you had a question?
So just to frame this process of making something, we have a kind of ideation conversation phase. And by moving to a visualization of something, we are getting into production of knowledge. And that production of knowledge is collective, because each of you will give your understanding of what you have retained out of that. We'll put all this together and we'll share back to the entire group. And that will allow to push our understanding of complex system by adding each understanding together. And that is where it becomes interesting for all of us, because then we are building shared knowledge. That's the reason why we are doing this. And by doing some stuff, you'll remember some questions in a better way than just by, because now you'll go back, this session is finished. What's the time in India? Chai, huh? You'll have some chai and samosa, and then you'll go to sleep, and then it's finished. And you'll forget, and all these abstract ideas will be coming in, going out, and it's finished. And then you'll have lost 2 hours of your life. So I'm trying to provoke you and say, okay, let's do some sketching.
I think, Alok, I think Anand had a question for you. Anand, you're up.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you need to voice up a little because.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir, we basically spoke about the critical design and the the part of commercialization of design that we are facing today. And definitely a time period is what matters for getting critical. Like we are basically designing for the future. And I even heard you saying that you were busy sending letters to the governments about how will your design, how will your thinking would work, how will I get it done. So, sir, is there any, it's more a practical question. What was your process? You might have some design thought with you, some critical thing that you might have framed. How did you proceed with it? And like, how did you send the letter to them? Do you have any other ways to convey your message, or is there any other forum for designers to speak up? Thank you.
So I'll try to address that first from my point of view, and then I'll take distance.
Right.
So from my point of view, and it's the case for each of us, when we get frustrated, we need to do stuff. And that is one of the common traits we have as designers. Frustration leads to action. So I was getting so frustrated by seeing all this bullshit on the news, because 90% of the news is bullshit. We have to be critical. They are copy and pasting stupid stuff. And then people like you are busy understanding complex systems, spending hours and hours thinking about scenarios. Nobody even comes to you and asks for your point of view. And so what do you do? Or you cry in your room, or you speak up. We have fantastic tools like social media, computer, and all this stuff. So let's speak up. So if all of you speak up, then maybe something will happen, because we'll have the UID Students Manifesto. That is something you can do. And to add a provocation, I would say that all the students who are here and who do some visualization, maybe we can frame that as a publication and send that to Mr. Modi. So I'm raising the level up. I'm asking you to do some good stuff so that we can send that to Modi and say, okay, Modi, here, designer wala hai. What can we do with us together? Let's go design stuff. So does that answer to your question?
Yeah, but sir, one more question. Did you get any answer?
Oh, the letter is being sent like these days.
Okay.
So it went through all the different design bodies in Belgium, because you know we have 3 governments in Belgium: the French-speaking one, the Flemish-speaking one, and the Brussels one. So things are in process. It's complex systems. But even if it stops somewhere, I don't care, because I'm opening some other, you know, designers, if they close the door, we go through the window. So I'm pushing some windows. And that is our design mindset: exploration, provocation. We are there to provoke and to rethink systems. So that's a way to make tangible all this abstract blah blah I did for an hour. It's because I'm trying to do some concrete activism, design activism. And then I need to reflect and say, okay, why are we doing what we are doing? That is the essence of your activity. Why are you spending an hour with me while you can go and have your chai and your samosa? Why am I spending 1 hour with you and Colonel Bose and Abhijit and Rahul, while I can do and cook and have my dal chawla? Because I think we need to have conversations and push our thinking. And our thinking can be pushed only by interaction and conversation. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. So one more question. Sir,
Yeah.
Siddharth,
The next one, you'll have to bring chai for everyone. Huh?
Sure, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I think Siddharth had a question about how to put it in a caricature like we have in commercial design. Like these days we have it in commercial design, like we have a caricature first that we don't have in critical design. So I think probably I have the same question, how to, the first fundamental of it is the research part. Research, the quantification of research is what we only have to show in critical design. So do you have a caricature that you have set for a process that you have set for your critical thinking?
Can you give me some more words about what you mean by caricature?
So a caricature means like if a design process starts, like the basic design process, the traditional design process that we see, the commercialized design process, it has to go through the linear way that, as you said, it has many loopholes and you have like commercialized stops every stages. But critical thinking, like fiction or speculative design, so they are only based on research. They're only based on quantitative aspects. So is there any caricature that you follow, or is it only based on the research and it is only based on the topic that we take up?
I tend to be agnostic. So what I do is when I see one method or one approach, let's use the word approach. When I see one approach on something, I quickly tend to push myself in applying another approach. So when things get too much structured, then I'll try to go and look into anecdotes and re-question anecdotes and look for small signals and cues. And that is what we are doing a lot as designers. We are not only scientific, methodic in our process. We are trying to mix and bring all this stuff. So I use often, you know, nearly every region in India, every state, they have rice as a main meal. And you know, with rice, you have dal. And you have one fantastic meal, which is called khichdi. Each family has got its way of cooking the khichdi. So I'm using the metaphor of khichdi. We as designers, we are khichdi makers. So we have to use some spices, some type of dal, the way we cook the dal and all this. So I'm using a lot this cooking metaphor when I look at design. Does it make sense? You disappeared. Where are you? Oh yeah, you are here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what I'm telling is that one method should question you in rethinking, is it the right method? And is it the method only for all the process, or is it only the method for one part of the process? And that is where I was telling in the beginning of my talk, we need to move from the object, the method as object, to a series of methods as dynamic objects. And all the challenge, how do we move from linear thinking to interactive mode thinking, is how do we bring our dynamic ways and reactive. We need to be both active, reactive, and activist when we are using method. Always be unhappy of what you're doing in terms of process. And I think, yeah, Rahul was typing in the chat, what, how, why, when, you know, where it's always, you know, the 5 why. Why am I doing this? Why? And Japanese designers are so good into pushing themselves, in getting the essence. Why am I spending so much time or so little time in doing this? What does it bring to the system, to the staff, and to me? These are the obsessions we should have as designers. Why? But why to whom? Why to the system? Why to the next? Why to me? If I am not happy of doing what I do, then I'm stupid. Why am I teaching and professor in some schools? because I enjoy sharing ideas, because I'm trying to be in dialogue and envision some stuff, because all of you have brilliant ideas. The problem in many schools is that you have been set in what I call industrial education systems. 28 to 35 students in a room. This is the industrial mindset. Today, we are more in dialogic mindset. That is more interesting for you and for me. And those who want to raise their hand, they raise their hand. Some of them, they don't want to raise their hand because they need more time to think and to reflect. And maybe someone will send me a mail in 3 days telling, what you said was bullshit, I don't agree. Okay, then tell me why it was bullshit, and let's go into argumentation. And then we are generating new knowledge. And then between you, you'll begin to talk and chat, and you'll have in your Facebook group, Alok Nandi was so abstract. What do we do? Okay, but I asked you to do some visualization to create knowledge, because I know that I'll be criticized as abstract. But remember, in the word abstract, you have act. Act, interact. Act, action. Act, activist. So our job as designers is to work on the act. ACT. We are acting. And we can be acting by understanding and extracting abstraction, you see. So that is the thinking in which we are busy with. And I mentioned rasa, and I know that Rahul also is busy with rasa. Rasa is so important. Rasa was designed as a design thinking tool 1,000 years ago. If we go into Veda, into yoga, into all this, there has been so many design thinking there that we undervalue that. We need to have some stupid person from California telling that yoga is great, and then some Indians will say yoga is great. Come on, let's be critical about that. The relation, embodied knowledge into yoga is so rich, so nuanced. Let's go into Ayurveda cuisine or Ayurveda design thinking. There are so many stuff. Let's go into what Sufi are singing. I'm a fan of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Anyone knows Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan songs? Yeah. You should listen to songs of Nusrat. Okay, I was lucky, I met him 4 times. Yeah, I met Nusrat because I was doing a student job in music. So in the end 80s, I met Nusrat. Listen to the poetry and the music of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Get inspired by that, because there is so much systems thinking in some of the Qawwali. So, and this is things we need to be inspired by. So I've been rambling on some other stuff. Huh?
Can I ask something? Do we have time for that?
Yeah, sure.
No. Okay, I'm sorry. But now that you brought up the topic of how olden Indian civilization has been so rich in terms of design thinking, is it wise to go back to such a civilization and take whatever works in today's system? And like, because another problem that we face is that in terms of political problems, at least, is that people shut down Indian culture because they associate it with a certain religion, instead of looking at the design thinking aspects of what our culture has brought to us. And do you think it's wise for us to go back and somehow change this mindset? And if so, how can we do that?
I think it is, as long as you are able to frame it. We should not confuse knowledge and religion. In some religions, we have some knowledge systems. We need to understand them. We need to have critical reading, and we need to extract what is interesting. I'm interested in Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan as a generator of knowledge. as well as in some Ayurveda cuisine models, as well as in some Japanese Zen monks. You know that Zen is coming from India to Japan via China. If you go back into the etymology of Zen, it's connected to some Veda thinking. There were so many flows of ideas 900 years ago, 1300 years ago, between India and China, and from there to Korea, that we forget, and we think China and India are opposite. But there has been so many interesting intellectual knowledge flows. We need to go back and try to understand. So what I'm claiming, to your point, is that we need to go back to what I call history of ideas. And I would put histories of ideas, because there are many histories. And we have to be careful. Now, the dominant history of design is supposed to be industrial design, design invented in 150 years ago. That is stupid bullshit, because so many design historians are Western-centric historians who think that design was invented in 1850 or in 1854. We need to be critical about that. So in one of my talks, I was telling in India, we need more design historians. We need more design theorists, because those people are influencing design practitioners. And we need to build school of thoughts, understanding how rasa was working 1200 years ago and how it shaped design thinking. Design thinking may sound sexy today, but let's get rid of the word design and let's go deeper into the thinking. And let's reapply that and say, okay, what are design thinking school of thoughts coming in your school, in your region, in your state? You need to be more explicit. You have the power. Who's gonna stop you? You just post it. Good. Any other question, topics?
Yeah, Alok, if you still have time, I think Atika wanted to ask a question. Atika, you are up.
Hi, sir. Thank you so much for today. I wanted to ask you that you said that mastery of abstract. Can you hear me?
So, sorry, Atika, your sound is going up and down. Maybe you can come a little bit closer.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, we can now.
So I wanted to ask you that, as you said, the mastery of abstraction is very important, and it's important to stay connected to the design world. But I'm in the 8th semester, and I'll be soon stepping into the corporate world. How do we, keep ourselves attached to the abstraction when we are working on projects, corporate projects, and when we are getting into the business?
Yeah, that's a tough, realistic, everyday question, and it's a good question you are bringing on. So what you're bringing also on is, are we monotasker?
Yeah.
As human beings? The problem is that systems, and especially the one who is going to pay your salary if you are working in a corporation, they want to hijack your brain 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Or 120% of the time. And that is a complex question to which we can have theoretical answer or we can have personal answer. So what is the personal answer? And I'll give you my personal answer. My first job, and Rahul mentioned, was at Procter & Gamble. Everybody knows Procter & Gamble, P&G, yeah. Shampoo, Vicks, all this is P&G, huh? Procter & Gamble. So they hired me and they said, okay, you'll have to work and on this brand management, advertising. And I said, okay, this is only one part of my life. The other part of my life during the night is I'm working on cinema writing. And my abstraction and theory and generation was happening in the evening. So my answer to your question is, as designer, you don't have only one temporality, which is the corporate voila. That one is one part of your life and is also to feed your stomach. But you need also to feed your brain. And to feed your brain, it's not only from 9 to 5 in that corporate voila room. It's when you are making some, you know, I do lots of cooking. Why? Because cooking helps me to escape and to think about new ideas. Because my hands are busy with some stuff and my brain is busy thinking.
Okay.
What I'm trying to give as a personal answer is that we are multitasker. But we have a stomach and we need to have that stomach fed. So we need a job. But as designers, we need to play with 2-3 ways of doing and thinking: execution and exploration. Now, exploration cannot be linearized and cannot be hooked in one specific place. Exploration happens when you're running from A to B or biking or whatever. Ideas come. And we need always to keep that zone of ideas coming and jumping in. So I don't have a clear answer to your complex question. What I can tell is that the systems in which we are living have structured time boxing, and we need to break those time boxing. So one way also is to negotiate with your manager when you'll have your job, is to say that every Friday lunchtime, each designer shares some surprise to all the others. And that creates a new dynamic. So you see, you can hijack the system and you can begin to do something. And you keep the time for you and stuff like that. So these are some ways I use. I don't know if it resonates with you, but are you already working? Not yet.
No, I'll be starting after my graduation.
Okay, yeah. And there are some complex questions coming on the table. Have you heard of companies, because of this working from home, where they put systems in your computer so that you have to be 8 hours a day in front of your stupid computer with your fingers on your screen board? Otherwise, they are going to send you police, if I use a metaphor. Yeah. That is an ethical problem. That is against human freedom. How, as designers, can we rethink working from home, where we don't have that pressure because a stupid manager is freaking out because he doesn't control? I was telling in one of my talks, we think that we are in a society of creativity, but we are in a society of control. And it's called capitalistic control, because they want to extract your brain and your work power for their system. So we need to be critical, but I'm getting philosophical there. Huh? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions, anybody? I think we are almost past 1.5 hours now.
They are getting fed up. We are getting too much abstract here.
Sir, can I just ask one thing?
If you can come closer, because there is lots of reverb. Yeah.
So that's happening. So if you can actually come closer to the mic.
Yeah. Now I'm audible, right? Hello. Yes. Okay, sir. So has you said that right now there's a lot of gaps which has happened right now, that most of our generation do not know more about Rasa and Veda and yoga, this thing. So right now, if I just want to have a start understanding about it, what one step I can take today, to start having an understanding of it? Because if someone have I don't know, I do not see among my friends also who have a lot of understanding of this thing right now, more of Veda and all. I have no understanding, so how could I start right now having more insight on it?
You don't mind rephrasing because I lost one part of the audio?
Yes.
Or Abhijit, you got everything?
Actually, I did not, because in
The audio was...
your voice is actually going off.
Okay, sir. Like I was trying.
That is much better.
Okay. I was trying to say that like what I've observed among my friends and like in my class, that most of us were not that much were interested into Rasa and Veda and to like trace back to art history. So what one step we can do today, like to develop interest in those topics and like to start exploring about it, because there is nowhere like we are not being that much introduced to those concepts, I think. So what I can start, or what we can start of developing interest into it, like.
Okay, so you are raising a very fundamental question, which I'll try to frame your question in a larger way for design. What is the essence of design activities is try to learn about things they don't know. Tomorrow, there is a pharmacy company who will call you and tell you to design a logo. What are you going to do as a designer? You'll do some research, you'll do some interviews, and you'll begin to explore a landscape which you don't know about. But you have developed some methods of interviewing, of exploring this knowledge through your studies, because you have developed some patterns and some habits in exploring the unknown. So my suggestion is, if we talk about Rasa or Veda, it's an unknown territory for you as a knowledge territory.
Yes.
So as a designer, what I would do is try to meet some people who are knowledgeable about that and begin to have some conversations, interviews. Because that's the way how often we designers, we work. We try to identify some stakeholders who are knowledgeable about the systems in which we need to explore and do some stuff. And so that's why I call that a design journey. You have to draft the roadmap of your design journey in unknown territories. Tomorrow you will be called by the Air India will call you tomorrow to redesign the service design of how you are going to travel because of social distancing or physical distancing. How can we redesign how we are sitting in a plane? That might be a design question for day after tomorrow. Huh? Be ready. Jet Airways is already gone. Huh? So now you have Vistara, you have Indigo, and you have Air India and some others. They have to rethink what is travel. They will call designers. Unknown territory for you.
Right.
So it's the same. So what I'm tracing here is exploring Rasa and Veda, exploring a pharmacy design assignment, exploring travel in a plane. These are all completely different knowledge territories, but you as designers, you have developed your toolbox to be able to explore that in a meaningful way. Does it answer your question?
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
Cool. I think anything else? Anybody?
I think everybody is getting tired.
Okay, so I think Anusha, if you wanted to say something, I guess.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, for taking the time to have this session with us. It was incredibly beneficial. Since I didn't get to like attend the workshop, this was like very, very interesting. And like up until this point, I don't think I like fully understood how important it is to know the, the system that you're designing for. So just thank you. And I like really like that one thing you said, which was connecting intention to action. Like, it's noted down and like highlighted and all in my book. So yeah, thank you for this session.
Thank you. Now your challenge will be in the coming days. You have nearly every day a Zoom session. You have some hackathon and some stuff like that. Be critical about that in a constructive way. Because it's so time and energy consuming that what is the job of a designer? It's to choose. When you have to come with a scenario or a solution, you have checked all the assumptions as much as possible, and you have chosen some stuff and you are proposing that. In French, we call force de proposition. You are an agent of proposing some stuff. That is your role as designers. But in order to propose meaningful stuff, you have to absorb the world which is around you. And it goes back to the question which was asked just before you. To go into unknown territories, I have to absorb the territory. And that is what I call contextual thinking. I have to be in immersion into that territory, understand who are the players, what are the forces, what are the politics in between players, and then as designers, I can say, boom, this is something. And that is the fun I have as designers. So you're lucky, you are only 20s. You have 50 years of design practice coming in front of you. So good luck and enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and thanks Abhijit and Rahul and Colonel Bose to have organized this.
Very important, very important. And you also gave me a direction. I realized that as somebody who teaches history and theory, we completely miss out on giving our students exposure to Indian aesthetics. So I think one of the things that has come out of your webinar is that I will now design a couple of sessions on Rasa and Dhwani and try to make it relevant and open it up to our students. So this was a big mind opener for me. Thank you very much.
And happy to interact with you about Rasa and food, because it's part of my questioning.
I'm also extremely interested in this. So Rahul, if you're planning to interact, please include me in this as well.
Yeah. And we have many challenges to go on a day-to-day basis, but a wonderful Alok, opening out, unlocking certain new areas. Because there's a traditional mode, and when someone comes in, outside they open another chapter in their minds. And to be the student of tomorrow, or the teacher of tomorrow, or the professional of tomorrow, this is the time to be a sponge and absorb as much as possible. You never know what part of it is useful in your future jobs, in your dissertations, in somewhere where you are a researcher, a producer of new knowledge, etc. So students, thank you very much for your patience. I know that the exams and graduation project and so many things which you have to grapple with, you're not channelized inside the campus, but you have to deal with so many challenges around you. So thank you very much. And Alok, of course, for sparing time and giving us thoughts. And I'm sure they'll understand the implications of it when they do the submission of, and I'm sure they get a critical feedback on what they have submitted.